Okay, so please take a couple of moments to take your attendance when the system allows you to do so. In the meantime, I'm going to write a couple of things on board. Okay. Okay. Well, let's get started. Okay. Yeah. So I have posted the questions for the writing assignment for this coming Tuesday on Moodle. Please have a look at it if you haven't already done so. And as usual, we will come to class on Tuesday. You will write out the responses either in person or online. I just realized that I forgot to bring the written responses. I think a couple of you actually wrote out your response to in class the other time, and I was going to bring it today, but I forgot. Okay, my apologies. I'll try to bring on Tuesday. But anyway, so on Tuesday, as usual, you will either write your responses to me in class and then turn it into me, or you will turn it into me, online by email. Either way is fine. Okay, so we will do that. And in the meantime, let's get back to talking about mail. Okay, let's see. Are you able to pay attention? Not yet. Okay, good. Okay. Hopefully, those of you who are online are able to get attendance as well. I'm going to switch this, stop this thing. Okay, so this whole business of Mill and Liberty is it turns out that it's a bit more complicated than I realized. The plan at the end of Tuesday, my plan was to go on to chapter 2, and I will still say a bit about chapter 2 today. But it turns out that there's actually more. There's actually more to be thought and said about the harm principle than I gave it credit for on Tuesday. So most likely, most likely I will probably spend more time thinking. We'll probably spend more time thinking about the harm principle today, because, as I said, it turns out that there's quite a bit more going on than we suppose. In particular, I kind of want to go back later on. I want to go back to Matthew's question on Tuesday, which is what constitutes harm. That actually turns out to be, a really interesting question. But first thing first, I kind of like to start by, giving you the lay of the land, so to speak. Okay, so on Tuesday, we introduced the harm principle, and the harm principle is very simply that Mill believes that the only reason anybody can have for interfering with your liberty is to prevent harm to others. So that means that your liberty is absolute. Your right to freedom is absolute. If what you are doing does not harm other people. So even if what you are doing strikes me as being odious or vicious, even if you spend your entire paycheck on gambling or on drugs or whatever, so long as what you are doing doesn't actually harm other people, I really have no right. I have no right to stop you from doing what you are doing. I noticed that I said I don't have no right to stop you from doing what you are doing. I didn't say I have no power, right? Lots of people, in life, lots of people can have the power to do things to you. But when we are talking about political philosophy and moral philosophy, we are not asking whether people have the power to do things to you. What we are asking is whether people have the right or the authority to do things to you. Okay, what is the difference between power and authority and right? You can think about it this way. So, if I were to pull out a weapon, pull out a gun, and demand that you give me your money right now, I have the power to make you give me the money, right? But I don't have the legitimacy to do so because what I'm doing is robbery. But if the government asks you to pay taxes, they are also asking you to give them the money, right, your money, right? But in this case, they have authority, they have legitimacy, because they have a rightful claim to your money. And the claim is, as we said on Tuesday, the claim is that you have enjoyed the services of being a citizen of this country. So by right, you should pay your dues. And so they have the right to come and collect the money from you. Whereas I, as a private citizen, I don't have the right to collect any money from you by gunpoint or anything like that. That would be robbery. So I have the power, but I don't have the right. Whereas the government, in theory anyway, the government has both the power and the right. So what the Mill principle, what the harm principle is concerned with is how much right do other people have to interfere with your freedom? And the answer is the only way that people can rightfully interfere with your freedom is when your actions will cause harm to other people. Okay, so how do you prevent? In order to prevent other people from wrongfully interfering with your freedom, Mill believes that we need to demarcate. We need to demarcate the area of your life that nobody can interfere with, and that area of your life, according to Mill, is called the inward domain of consciousness. So the inward domain of consciousness is the part of your life that basically concerns only yourself and what you want to do. So in order to secure the liberty of this inward domain of consciousness, Mill proposes that there are three liberties. There are three liberties that any free society should guarantee to its citizens, and these three are liberty of conscience, liberty to think what you want, and that also includes freedom of expression and freedom of publishing what you want. And that makes sense because it's useless. It's kind of meaningless for me to tell you that you are free to think what you want if you don't have the ability to express what you are thinking, right? So freedom of conscience includes freedom of expression and publication. And then there is liberty of taste and pursuits. So you should be free. Again, so long as your actions don't harm other people, you should be free to indulge in whatever taste you want. You should be free to pursue whatever kind of life you want. Um, and then number three, liberty of combination and association. You should be free to combine and associate with whoever you choose. In other words, you should be free to make whatever friends you want to make. So these three things, according to Mill, are the three pillars. The three pillars that a society should guarantee to its citizens in order to be called a free society. Okay. Um, and the idea is that if you really take these three rights, take these three liberties, if a society really take these three liberties seriously, then this should be a society in which people largely leave other people alone to pursue whatever people deem fit. You could also say that this is a society in which people suffer each other to pursue whatever they deem fit, even if they disapprove of what other people are doing. Um, so, and this is actually one of my favorite. It's not just my favorite quote from Mill. It's my favorite quote, probably from. Well, it's one of my favorite quotes in all of philosophy. So Mill famously said that mankind are greater gainers by suffering each other to live as seems fit to themselves, than by compelling each to live as seems good to the rest. I think I just butchered it a little bit. But the general idea, right, is that we are better off as a society if we suffer each other, if we tolerate each other's idiosyncrasies and eccentricities. We'll be better off that way than if we were to try to compel or force each other to adopt one particular lifestyle. Um, and so the idea is that, and why is that good? Okay, so why is this good for society? Why is it good to tolerate people whom you find weird or even distasteful? The reason is because a society which tolerates a huge diversity of points of view and a huge diversity of lifestyles is much more likely to do well in the long run than a society that doesn't. And the reason is because if you allow a diversity of different opinions and different lifestyles to flourish, you're much more likely to be able to arrive at the truth, so to speak. Okay, what is the truth? The idea is that if you allow a huge diversity of viewpoints and lifestyles to flourish, then you basically are allowing a free marketplace of ideas. Everybody is free to bring to the public, bring to the market their own lifestyles, their own views of seeing and doing things. And if you do this, then if all the ideas are I think Chairman Mao once said that he once called this "let 100 flowers bloom." I don't know how many of you read Chairman Mao, but the idea is that it's better to let 100 flowers, 100 different kinds of flowers bloom, Some of these flowers will be, wonderful flowers. Maybe some of them will be weeds. But the weeds, in such an environment, the weeds or the bad ideas will be weeded out, right? If somebody's way of living is not productive or doesn't contribute to his own well-being or to others, it'll become very clear to everybody that this is not a good way to live, and so everybody will become wiser as to what is the correct and the true way to live. And then, to make a long story short, you could also say that Mill is very much against censorship. And a reason why is that you got to allow all kinds of ideas to be put out into the open, into the marketplace, so to speak. Because if you allow all kinds of ideas to be put out into the open, then what happens is that if my idea happens to be true, see, what happens is that very often good ideas and true ideas, they are usually not very popular in the beginning. It takes people maybe years or even decades to kind of see the value of a good idea. So if you don't allow the good idea to come out into the marketplace, if you censor the good idea, then people will be deprived of a chance to come into contact with a good idea. But what about bad ideas? What if shouldn't we censor bad ideas? Well, Mill thinks no, we shouldn't, because if you censor bad ideas, then you see, even bad ideas have a place in the world. Even bad ideas can play a constructive role, right? If my idea is bad and your idea is good, and we collide, then by colliding, we can see more clearly why you have a good idea and why my idea is bad. And I can learn something, and you can also learn something. So if we censor or suppress bad ideas, then we are basically we are actually not doing truth a service. So either way, right? Whether you have a good idea or bad idea, there is a good reason not to engage in censorship, because censorship, is a bad practice, whether you are engaging in good ideas or bad ideas. So I want to say that Mill is a very influential thinker, because all of these ideas are ideas that if you were to use today's political spectrum to look at all these ideas, you might ask, are these liberal ideas or are these conservative ideas? Actually, I would say probably both, because if you will find that a lot of even conservatives, a lot of most maybe I shouldn't say most, but many conservatives also believe in these three liberties. They also believe that censorship is bad and wrong. So I think the reason why Mill has so much influence, and is even today, is because his ideas have brought appeal to both liberals and conservatives, and probably even libertarians too. Okay, so much for that. Let me just go back to, as I say, I want to go back to talking about the harm principle, because I realized that there's actually much more going on. There's a bit more to be thought about than I give it credit for. Give me a second. Okay, so the harm principle. Now, again, if we take the harm principle seriously, we will believe. Then you will believe, if you take the harm principle seriously, you will believe that the only reason for interfering with somebody's liberty is if his actions would do harm to other people. Now, most people who read Mill in the traditional way, they would say that harm should only be restricted to physical harm. So harm. Harm is not the same thing as offense. So most traditional readers of Mill, most people who read Mill the traditional way, will tell you that in a median society, in a kind of society that Mill is envisioning, you know, in the kind of free society that Mill is envisioning, this society would tolerate a very wide range of views. It would tolerate even views that might be deemed to be offensive to many people in that society. Why is that? Because very often when truth is being spoken, when a good idea is being spoken, sometimes people are not used to that good idea because it's so new and so radical, and so it might offend people, right? Like for example, when when the civil rights movement first started, when people, when the civil rights activists first started sitting at lunch counters, this was very offensive to, it was very offensive to people who did want integration, right? So if you were to not allow offensive ideas, then you will very likely be banning or suppressing ideas that are good and progressive. Okay, so on the traditional understanding of Mill, you can only, again, I know I'm repeating myself, you can only interfere with somebody's liberty if his actions harm somebody. And it seems that, on this traditional understanding, harm is taken to be physical harm. Right? If I sit at a lunch counter, you might find it offensive, but I'm not physically harming you, right? So, and it's not going to, people can't, you can't say that I shouldn't, that a black person shouldn't be allowed to sit at a lunch counter because because it hurts my eyes to look at him sitting at the lunch counter. Because it causes me distress, and distress is a kind of harm. Mill wouldn't buy that. Mill would say that the only thing that really counts as harm is, again, physical harm. Okay, so far so good. But I don't know. I mean, it's like this is kind of as I said, this is this idea of harm as physical harm as opposed to just offense is something that the traditional believer in Mill would go for, would espouse. But it seems that in recent years, right? In recent years, there have been a lot of developments. There's been these different movements, all these different movements that try to expand this idea of harm, so that it doesn't include just physical harm, but maybe psychological harm as well. One example is pornography. Many, over the last maybe 30 or 40 years, maybe longer than that, over the last 40 years or so, many feminists have come up and to speak out against pornography. And the argument is something like this. The argument is that even although pornography is not, although it's not really anything physical, right? It's just something you see on the screen or in a book. The argument is that pornography is harmful to women because it exposes certain ideas. It portrays women in a way that is degrading to women. So the argument on the feminist argument, more or less, is that, and by the way, I feel a bit uneasy to call it in calling it a feminist argument, because I think not all feminists are equally opposed to pornography. So maybe I should call it one feminist argument. Okay, one feminist argument is that that pornography is harmful because it portrays women in a degrading way. And why is it bad to portray women in a degrading way? It's bad to portray women in a degrading way because, because if you portray women in a degrading way, and then men men who look at all these depictions of women will start to believe that it is okay to treat women in this, degrading way, and that will eventually lead to actions down the road that demean women, devalue women, and degrade women. So they are. So if you think of what they are doing, what these feminists are doing is that they are actually operating with a much bigger definition of harm. For them, harm is not just something physical, right? For them, if pornography is harmful, if just seeing some images on a screen or reading looking at some images in a book can be harmful, then that means that harm is not just physical harm for them, right? Harm is, anything that degrades, anything that leads to degrading people is a harm. And if having certain ideas about women can lead to degrading women, then the ideas are harmful. Um, And then if you come to, if you come to even, to another area of society, recently people have also, I think in the last maybe 30 or 40 years, some people have also argued that certain words, can also be harmful. For example, if I say certain things that are racist, racist speech can be harmful according to some people, because why? Because racist speech, well, two things, right? It propagates certain stereotypes of maybe of minorities, which leads to and that in turn leads to people possibly being influenced by these stereotypes, and then taking actions that would discriminate against minorities or would oppress them. So again, people who believe that hate speech is wrong now would also say that hate speech is harmful because it promulgates certain negative stereotypes which eventually lead to oppression or enable the oppression of minorities. So speech, according to feminists who believe that pornography is bad, as well as people who believe that hate speech is bad, these people have one thing in common, which is that they believe that uh, speech and ideas can be just as harmful as physical movements, physical actions. Um, Interesting. So basically, we're back to the question of what constitutes harm. I don't know. I've been kind of thinking about this a lot. See, just now I gave you, the three basic rights within a free society, right? But if you take this idea seriously, if you take the idea seriously that that the harm is not just physical harm, but there is also such a thing as psychological harm that can come from pornography or from racist speech. If you take this bigger idea of harm, if you take this seriously, then it seems that if I can be harmed by hate speech, then that means that I should have a right to be protected from hate speech. I mean, or racist speech, right? Then that means that in addition to those three rights that I just mentioned, there should also be a fourth right, which is the right. Maybe I should also have the right to not be offended. Yeah, because I don't know if that's the correct way to put it. So if I find pornography to be deeply offensive, and harmful, if I find racist speech to be deeply offensive and harmful, I should have a right, I should be protected from all these things. So I should have a right not to be offended by hate speech. And I should also have a right not to be offended by pornography. I don't know. I mean, should we have a right? Should people have the right not to be offended? Okay, why am I worried about this? I'm worried about this because, you know, I think protecting people from psychological injury is a good thing. I mean, you know, they are spurred by good intentions. But on the other hand, I worry that we might be going down a slippery slope. And the slippery slope is that, you know, sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's not easy to define what exactly counts as pornography. I mean, you know, I don't know. If you go on Pornhub and just Google search for some random thing, there's probably pornography. But what about, I don't know, what about something like 50 Shades of Grey? Is that pornography, or is that just a horrible piece of writing? And then what about, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure you probably have read novels like Lolita, which involve, you know, Lolita involves a sexual relationship between a middle-aged man and, you know, and an underage woman. But most people do not take that to be pornography, partly because there are very little depictions of the actual sex in that novel, and also because it seems to be more of an exploration of what is going on in the mind of the man and the woman, rather than just depiction of sex for the sake of sex. But somebody could argue that, look, this kind of thing, this kind of novel like Lolita, you know, it's basically sort of tacitly approving of this kind of power relationship, and therefore it degrades women, and maybe they could maybe argue that therefore it's pornography. So I don't know, and even racist ideas, you know. I mean, it's one thing to, you know, it's one thing for me to encounter the KKK, and you know, so that's one kind of racism. But some other things is not clear that is racism. Like for example, maybe if I were a psychologist who was doing research on the, you know, on the cognitive abilities of people from different races, and I were to say something like, oh, based on my research, based on my observing many students from different races, I have observed that on the average, Asian people seem to perform better at mathematics than white people or black people. That could be taken by some people as racism, because I'm making certain broad statements about races. But you know, but I could argue that I'm just trying to do science in a way, right? I'm collecting a whole bunch of information and saying that, oh, under these conditions, Asians seem to perform better than other races. But then again, you know, even if I'm presenting in this way, in this kind of scientific way, some people might find that deeply upsetting. They might say, look, it propagates certain racist ideas. You know, or a whole bunch of black and white people are going to grow up thinking that they are not good at mathematics, and maybe they will do less mathematics. I don't know. So. Okay, any thoughts about this? Should we have a right to not be offended? Lacey?
I feel like for the harm principle, there are different degrees of harm, so like physical and psychological. And I feel like physical might be, I don't know, more intense or worse than psychological, but at the same time, that just depends on the instance. So like the right to be offended, that would be psychological. But is it like if we're comparing it to physical harm, like which one would be worse?
If we are comparing the kind of psychological harm that comes from racist remarks or pornography to physical harm, which one is worse? Well, there are people out there, right? I think I suspect that there are families out there who would say that they are both as bad, just as bad, because they would say, look, pornography it may not lead to violence against women right this very minute, but if enough men were to watch pornography, they will eventually, they will eventually get to the point where they think it's okay to do certain things to women. So it might very well lead to actual physical violence against women somewhere in the future. So it's not, so in that sense, it's just as bad because it's not physical violence now, but it's physical violence later. So there are people who would say that. I don't know. Oh, my shirt.
Oh, thank you. I got it for $3.
Oh, okay. No, very apt for this occasion.
I have a drink.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. So I don't know. I mean, on the other, I don't know. I mean, it's like sure. So there are people who argue that psychological harm that comes from the future harm or the psychological harm that comes from pornography is just as bad as as physical harm. Frank?
This is Matthew raises hand.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sorry, Matthew. I did not see your hand. Okay, Matthew, you're going to say something.
I would say I think that there's a difference between psychological harm and offense. Because someone can say something offensive, but that doesn't have any more long-lasting repercussions. But some things like do have long-lasting repercussions, like if government leaders like Hitler, like he kept on saying that like, oh, the Jews are terrible, the Jews are terrible, the Jews are terrible. And so that eventually did have long-term repercussions and terrible, terrible things happened because of it. But then on the other hand, like the average and person who's racist doesn't cause that much harm. It's just mostly a dirtbag. So I feel like there has to be a difference between offense and psychological harm.
What if we live in a world? Suppose history were a little bit different. Suppose that Hitler. Okay, so suppose that Hitler, he was able. Suppose that he was able to give all the speeches that he gave, and say all the terrible things he said about Jews in his and all that. But suppose that somehow he was prevented from actually taking any action. So suppose somehow Kristallnacht never happened. Somehow the Jews never got sent to the ghettos or the gas chambers or anything like that. Suppose it's just this guy who's doing all these Hitler salutes, wearing the swastika, and giving all these explosive speeches about Jewish people. Okay, suppose basically I'm saying suppose we change history so that we have Hitler, but minus Kristallnacht and all the gas chambers and the ghettos and all that, minus all the actual physical harm to Jews. Would that make Hitler I guess my question was gonna be, would that make Hitler less harmful? Lazy?
I feel like it would still, you would still identify like as an extreme racist, but I don't know, it would be offensive, but I don't, like, it definitely would not have been bad, I think, obviously, because there was no physical harm done, and that's like, well,
I mean, words incite violence, right? When Trump started blaming coronavirus on China, didn't hate crime against Asian Americans go up like 100% or something? I mean, he didn't go out
on the papers, but yeah, maybe.
beat somebody up because of it, but then other people did because of the things he said, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, okay, I am not a Trump supporter, but you know, I feel the need to play devil's advocate. You know, Trump, I don't think Trump, I'm not sure if it would ever occur to Trump to say this, but he could say in defense of himself, he'll say, look, I happen to think that coronavirus comes from China, and I happen to think that it's the Chinese people's fault because of that. But I'm just expressing my own views. You know, you can't blame the actions of a few rednecks or whatever on me, right? That the rednecks can choose, so those guys can choose to they can choose to do whatever they want with my words.
I'm sure you could say that, yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at it, if he were to say that, then basically you'll be saying, look, I mean, I have just as much freedom to express my views as anybody else.
And he does, but it doesn't make, don't your words cause harm?
That's basically the same kind of argument as the people would say against pornography, right? Pornography incites men to do certain things against women, and in the same way, you know, these words incite certain people to do certain things against Asian people. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I agree. I'm just okay. Let me put it. If you were to ask me personally, right? If you were to sit me down personally and ask me, do you think that Trump's words against China in this way, does it cause harm? In my own very private mind, I would say yes. I think it does because people are influenced by words and ideas, and when they get influenced by words and ideas, they don't just sit around and do nothing about it, right? They will take some kind of action that reflects their belief in those words and ideas. But having said that, if you ask me in the next question, which is that, should we then ban Trump from saying all the things that he has said? I would be very uneasy about banning Trump from saying the things that he said.
I agree with you.
Yeah, just because even if you think that Trump is a racist idiot, well, you know, idiots, even racist idiots should have the freedom to say whatever they want to say.
You're right.
Yeah. It's just that, you know, of course, we would like to. It'll be a lot more pleasant to live in a world in which there are no racist idiots. But what do you do, right? Yeah, there are idiots running around. So
I feel like it is pretty difficult to when you have somebody in power who is considered like very racist, making remarks because, like you said, like they're gonna say what they're gonna say, but it's harder, I suppose, when they have power behind them, because then people trust them and believe in them, and then that's when people get physical and do things, I suppose.
yeah. Well, the thing is that, you know, so Mill, as I said, Mill believes that we should never censor anybody because it's only when we have a free marketplace of ideas that racist and idiotic ideas can be exposed for what they are, and then people won't take them seriously. But that's really not what's happening. I mean, you know, there are enough people who believe in these racist and idiotic ideas to really actually act on them and do bad things to Asian people. So it seems that I don't know. I wonder if Mill has too much faith in in human beings, in human nature. Because, right, I mean, Mill basically believes that if you let all the ideas be expressed, eventually people will see bad ideas for what they are because they will compare them with the good ideas and then they will stop taking the bad ideas seriously. But it seems that, at least in this country, there are enough people who take bad ideas seriously to, to do all kinds of horrible things to them. So, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, and if you think about it, so the first thing is that even if we agree with Mill that people should have the freedom of expression, liberty of conscience, it is not clear. I mean, it's not clear that the free marketplace of ideas is such a, it's not clear that it's such a good thing. Because the free marketplace of ideas it assumes that people are wise enough to differentiate between good ideas and bad ideas. But I don't know if that's true. So it kind of comes back to the Hum principle as well, right? The Hum principle basically says that you are not allowed to interfere with anybody's actions or life choices unless that person's life choices and actions will harm another person. And basically that means that you should be allowed to leave people to do whatever they want unless they harm other people. But that assumes, right? That assumes that people always know what is best for themselves. So, according to the Hum principle, if I choose to just stay at home all day and play video games and smoke certain substances, I should be free to do that, right? Because Hum principle, right? I mean, okay, so we are assuming that I have a lot of money. I can get all the substances that I need to get without robbing people or anything like that. I can I don't know, maybe I have a big inheritance or something. So I can also get all the video games I get I need to get without needing to borrow money from other people or rob other people for money. Okay, so if that's the case, if I'm independently wealthy, I should be allowed to sit at home and play video games and do whatever I want. Is that the best way of life for me? Well, probably not. But me would say that's none of your business. Because my actions are not harming anybody. The problem is that if you allow enough people to do that, then basically you are allowing a big part of the population to just do whatever they want without developing themselves. Without getting an education or whatever. And if you, I know I sound very old-fashioned, but I can't help feeling that if more people in this country had better education, there will be less people who would take certain racist and idiotic ideas seriously, right? So if you think about it in that way, then allowing people to sit at home and play video games and smoke substances is not just allowing. It's actually not a harmless action if you think about it, because it actually ends up harming other people. It actually ends up harming other people down the road. They end up harming other people down the road with their own ignorance. So,
I mean, there are truancy laws, right? Don't parents get in trouble for not sending them to the school?
yes. Lazy.
I was gonna say with that though, I feel like a lot of the time based on certain households, kids will not be learning or they'll be learning different habits from their parents as well, not necessarily just from school, but from their environment.
Yeah, and these habits may be good or bad. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so the thing is that, if you believe if you are a traditional believer in you would say that
His raven is Matthew.
okay. Yeah, so if you're a traditional believer in I'm coming to you, Matthew. So if you are a traditional believer in male, you would say that there shouldn't be truancy laws, right? Because the state shouldn't tell me what to do with my child. If I want my child to stay at home and play video games all day, how is it any of the state's business? Okay, Matthew, sorry.
Just with the child thing though, is that like how you said like your example of this person who like stay at home all day and like does drugs and all just play video games, like, but then if that person then has a child, then a lot of times that child is harmed physically from that parent's choices. Like drug babies are a really sad issue that's happening.
That's true.
And so there is like things do affect the kids, and the kids aren't making the choices to be in that situation. The kids are thrown into that situation by the parents,
That's true.
by the parents' choices. So do kids, like little kids, get the same rights as adults?
Um, I'm just thinking that maybe if you are a druggie who's playing video games at home, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to have kids. Maybe that's the moral response.
What are you gonna do? Euthanize them or something?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because the moment you start having kids, then it's no longer just a self-regarding action, right? It's also an other regarding action. Right? Because your actions start to have impact on one other human being. So yeah, maybe so maybe there's an easy solution for this problem. Just make sure that the druggies who play video games at home never have kids. And yeah, maybe even male would approve of that, because right, again, harm principle, right? In this case, you are interfering with his freedom of having kids, because it's quite clear that if he does have kids, he will harm the kid. Prem,
Is that an indefinite answer that kid will be harmed at all?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's possible, right? The kid might get lucky. He might not have any brain damage when he gets born, and then he might look at his dad doing drugs and playing video games, and basically say, "What a loser!" And then he will go to school and then go to Harvard, and it could happen.
I guess that could be a possibility, but I was just thinking that Matthew might be using a slippery slope fallacy because he says just because the parents are like that, kids will turn up like that. He's pretty much using the quote, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But I also look at it like this: people, when they reach the right age, have the choices to make the decisions that they make. Just because someone in your family, like for example, has like a drug history or an alcohol history, it either shows that you can choose to be like that or you can choose to go away from it. It's your perspective on how you lean towards it. So I think Mill might be right. Like you can't control what people do with their actions because that's their right to make the choices. But I don't think it's right to throw in a slippery slope fallacy.
I don't think either of you are right. I think you're both right. Because like we don't know what's gonna happen. Maybe the kid gets it together, but I mean you start going to preschool at what, 4 or 5? Like the kid's not gonna know and the parent doesn't care. So it's not hard to see Matthew's argument that it's probably most likely not gonna get the stuff he needs to be successful.
Yeah, and there's lots of research out there that shows that it's easy for us to stand around here or sit around here and say the kid can just get it together. But there's lots of research out there that shows that kids in this kind of from this kind of upbringing have a much tougher time to get it together.
Right.
I mean, if you are growing up in that kind of household, well, I mean, chances are, you probably will have some kind of learning disability, like ADHD or something like that. And then you go to school, and then most likely the school counselor will see you, and I'm not saying it will happen definitely, but very likely, they will prescribe you certain drugs, Ritalin or whatever. And then which will make it harder for you. You will, I mean, basically what I'm saying is that from the get-go, you already have all these cognitive obstacles to learning. And then yeah, I mean, oh, I keep forgetting that. I keep forgetting that the guy, the dad is supposed to be wealthy. That's why he's playing video games. But in many cases, where the parents are not wealthy, most likely you will go to school where go to a school where many of the students have the same kinds of problems, and then the teachers would have very limited. They have very limited resources to help you to become a better reader or better better at mathematics, and so from the get-go, your chances of acing the SAT or the ACT or whatever is already not very good. So yeah, so I mean, so there are all these systemic there are already all these systemic obstacles that are thrown at a child. So again, right? Again, I would imagine that even male, if he were to know about all these systemic obstacles, even he would probably agree that maybe it's not such a good idea for this person to have children. Bracken?
Shouldn't the parent also like change?
Yeah, you could get it together.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he doesn't have to get her as the child was born, but so you really get attached to the child and might see something going on with the child and it might change himself. I mean, so if but then he also wouldn't have changed without the child. So maybe it's a good thing for him to have a child, and then the child started out not having the best child, but then the dad changed, helped the child more, kind of thing.
It's possible.
I believe there's a lot of variables to measure on to the experiment that we're talking about right now. Because I do agree with them, because like change can happen whenever like you do have children. Like those changes may be good, those changes may be bad. That's also going to be based on the perspective of what the person is and what the person wants. Because whenever people have children, like women, like when they have children, it's like statistically shown they mature more because they feel as if they have to take care of the kids. But like with men, they do have that feeling, but it's not like highly as how women have it. And it's not just like in terms of like women are better lovers to children. It's just like women just have a better bond to children because like they have to care the children. Like that's just basic science right there. But on top of that, it also goes on to constituents and says that there are like way too many variables to measure how it's going to turn out to be prospectively. But I do agree with that there is no, like it's wrong to make people choose or like make people do something. Because I don't think there was a harm there, but I guess it was kind of like an irresponsibility.
Yeah, you see, Mill seems to think of irresponsibility as this thing that only affects yourself. But it seems that even if the druggie chooses not to have children, he would still, if enough people are such video playing druggies and don't get an education, then it's more likely that we'll have people who would just believe whatever they hear on TV. And so if somebody comes along and says, oh, the coronavirus comes from China, China is to blame, then it's much more likely that you will have a big bunch. It's much more likely that if you don't have an education, you're much more likely to believe such a person and go out to maybe commit violent acts against Asian people. Actually, maybe it would have, because maybe it would be at home playing video games. But I mean, what I'm saying is that by not taking responsibility for your life and not getting an education, it's starting to seem that it doesn't just affect yourself. It affects it affects other people too. So what that means, I mean, what I'm basically driving at is that Mill seems to think that there are some actions that are purely self-regarding, and you should have all the freedom you want to do those self-regarding things. And then there are some things that are other regarding. But I'm not so sure if that's true. I mean, it seems that every action, everything that you do or don't do, has effects on, will eventually have effects on other people. So that means that there is no such thing as a purely self-regarding action. I don't know.
What are we trying to do? Figure out where the line is, where the government should step in and tell you what you should do.
Something like that. Or right now I'm questioning whether there is even such a line in the first place.
There are so many different things that can happen in so many different situations, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could go to the grocery store and grab the last bag of bread, but you don't necessarily need that, but then somebody's coming in and they need that bread, and then they starve or something like that.
Yes. So don't grab the last.
That could be harmful. I mean, anything could be harmful.
Yes. True. Basic.
I was gonna say, what about actions with pure intention?
What about your intentions?
What about actions with pure intention? Would that still result in harm, or
They could.
so it's possible for everything?
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of actions with good intentions that do end up harming people. I can't think of one example right now. But
Giving money to homeless people, they're going to use it on maybe drugs. We don't know.
yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. So you guys might remember people were talking about universal basic income was it last year? Yeah, last year when Andrew Yang was running. And there was this big debate about whether giving poor people money would solve any problems. So the assumption, me was assuming that there are basically two kinds of actions, right? You can draw a line between self-regarding actions and other regarding actions. But the more I think about this, right, if I'm thinking about the video game playing druggie, it seems that most of the things that we would think of as self-regarding actions are not really self-regarding actions. They actually have impacts on other people. So it's starting to look like if you're drawing the line here between self-regarding and other regarding actions, it looks like the line is slowly going here, all the way here until every action becomes other regarding action. And then as you said, I think you're probably right that even doing something as innocent as grabbing the last loaf of bread from the grocery store probably has effects on other people. And yes,
Maybe that's all they could eat.
yeah,
Bread or something, I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that you should just not do anything.
Right.
Yeah, because we got to do something. Yeah.
I guess another thing that you would like to observe it a little bit more is the motive behind the action, because like every action pretty much has a motive on like why you did it, like why you want to do it. Looking into like, is it wrong to like harm people like in such ways? I guess it'll just have to be like what levels of extreme does it go to? Because like of course government does have rules and regulations on like small like on big things, but they don't have it on minor things. Like some minor things that we may be viewed to be wrong, government don't really regulate it, but like some actions like for example like major theft, grand theft auto, like irresponsibility like that is like majorly regulated. But I guess it relies solely on the value of how much responsibility is given to that action or what the motive is behind it. Like how Lacey was stating, like the good intention behind it, would that be harm behind it? I guess that would like really relies on your motive, and if it's direct or indirect. Because your direct incentive is to like help someone, but indirectly it may be harming them, but you can't really observe it. That also goes on to the value of how extreme it really is.
Yeah. And of course, but if you are a utilitarian like Neil, you would say that it doesn't really matter because even if you do something with very good intentions and that person, it ends up with bad consequences, it still doesn't change the fact that your action brought about bad consequences. So if I give you a bunch of money and you use it to go buy drugs, it still wouldn't change the fact that my giving you money brought about bad consequences. And if you're a utilitarian and if you measure the rightness and wrongness of actions by the consequences, then you would still say that it was wrong of me to give you money. Right, because if I give you, okay, so utilitarianism, right? It says that action is right if it maximizes happiness, wrong if it doesn't. So if I give you a bunch of money and you go, use that money to buy drugs, and then after you buy drugs and take it, you go rob a few people, then my action will be wrong, right? Because my action has resulted, my giving you money has resulted in all these bad things happening.
That's why I don't agree with the utilitarian theory, because I think just like with limitations on time, you can't really observe, like it's not observable to see what your actions would do to that person. You do it out of the kindness of your heart, believing that it will lead to good things, but you never know what's going to happen behind it. So I only see like, if it's not observable until like what's going to happen truly with it, then I don't really think it has a reliance behind it. With your actions of what you wanted to do, like you see somebody homeless who's starving, you give them money, then out of the goodness of your heart, like, you know, like you believe like morally it would be right for like you to give them money. But since you really can't observe it, like there's just so much like variables to measure on observance right there, you don't know what's going to happen.
What's that show? That it's a chemistry teacher that gets diagnosed with cancer and then becomes a meth dealer.
Breaking Bad.
Yeah. So he's doing this so that his family has a future after he's dead. But he's also like, that's good, right? To make money and give it to your family. But he's selling meth and cooking meth, right?
I can tell you right away that this guy is not going to make it to the good place.
No, he's not. But I mean, it's good, but it's also horrible.
Yeah.
His intentions may be good in terms of kind of like self-interest. Like it's very self-interested, like he wants to help his family. It's very self-interested. But he doesn't look into the impacts of like what triple folds will happen. Like he gives them meth and sells it to people.
You're right.
Because meth has a lot of consequences in the human body. Those consequences may lead to like several types of delusions, which causes people to do bad things. And on top of that, it's like a triple fold action. Of course, we can observe certain parts of it. We can observe two realms. The first, self-interest, and second, the interest of like how far we go to harm other people. But it's not solely observable in terms of universality.
I don't know. Brendan?
Well, just bringing up Breaking Bad, because I really like the show. I've watched it through like twice, but it's really, you know, it's interesting seeing how you start out thinking, you know, oh yeah, he's doing not the greatest thing, but for his cousin, for his family. But if you watch the show, you start kind of, you know, rooting for him, like, oh yeah, you know, keep, you know, making money, whatever. But then you end up actually not liking him at all. He ends up becoming kind of, and it's not really a spoiler, but he kind of becomes not the greatest person. And but you still kind of have a heart for him because you followed him throughout the story. And I just think it brings really interesting concept to this, you know, how humanity still kind of plays into it. You actually still is somebody as a good person or a bad person.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about his actions, right, I think both Kant and Mill would disapprove. Mill would be because, well, you know, I mean, he's selling all these drugs which were ruining a lot of people's lives. Kant would say that he will also disapprove because by selling drugs to people, you are using people merely as a means to, you know, for your own personal happiness or for your own very narrow family happiness to provide for your kids. So both Kant, it seems that both Kant and Mill would disapprove. But you know, I mean, the reason why it's such a good show, I think, is that as you said, you end up rooting for him, right? And you end up rooting for him because his motivations are totally understandable, right? I mean, if you are in a desperate situation and you can't do anything else, and somebody says you can provide for your kids by selling drugs. I mean, you don't really have too many other choices, I think. So I don't know. I mean, so I think, you know, I guess this just shows that life is complicated because there are all these moral theories that we've learned, like utilitarianism, Kantian theory that tells us what we should do, and then you are in this, you know, situation where your only viable means of providing for yourself and your kids is to sell meth. Make it and sell it. And he could even try to justify his actions by saying, look, whatever other people might say, I have to provide for my kids because if I don't, who will, right? So it seems that normal people, when normal people make moral decisions, I mean, most of us don't sell meth, but we kind of think along the same lines too, right? If we have kids, our first priority is always to look after our own. So I don't know. I mean, if somebody offers you a job, suppose you have been jobless for months, and then somebody suddenly offers you a job. What would be a good example? Okay, so suppose somebody offers you a job at a tanning salon. Okay, and tanning salon sounds pretty harmless, but actually there are all kinds of scientific research that shows that the rays, all the rays that are emitted on people's bodies in the tanning salon can cause long-term harm. But you will probably take a job anyway just because, I mean, you got to provide for your kids. So it seems that in everyday life, most people's moral decision making is very much kind of centered around taking care of themselves and their family. And then after they've taken care of themselves and the families, then they maybe start to kind of think bigger and start to think, okay, what can I do for other people now that I've taken care of myself and my family? And it seems that I really shouldn't be saying this, but it seems that Kantian theory and utilitarian theory so far doesn't seem to take into account this particular aspect of human nature, which is that we tend to always take care of ourselves and our families first before thinking about anybody else.
It's true.
Yeah. Maybe Aristotle does a bit better. I don't know. Yeah. But okay, I was going to say how much time do I have? Okay, not much. But there was one. So okay, so a few things. There are a few things that come out of this discussion. So first, we are not sure whether we're not sure if harm should only be restricted to physical harm. And then the other thing that comes up is there really a line that we can draw between self-regarding action and other regarding action? And then the other thing is this. I think even in this country, most states have laws that mandate that children have to go to school. So if you have a child, right, you have to send him to school or maybe for homeschooling. So if you are a pure follower of Mill, you might say that law is wrong because people, the government shouldn't interfere with what you want to do. With what you want to do with your maybe children, but that law seems to, the fact that we have these kinds of laws that say that you have to send your kids to school for at least a few years. I think this shows that people believe that in order to be an effective citizen, you need to have at least a little bit of education. If you can't make good choices, then it is very difficult for you to use your freedom properly. If you just believe every single thing that you see on TV, you probably won't be able to make good choices. And in order to make good choices, not just believe every single thing you see on TV, you need an education. So that suggests that not all freedom is created equal. Right? It suggests that if I have education and somebody else doesn't, I will most likely be able to use my freedom better and wiser than the other person. So that seems to show that in order to give people a good life, in order to make sure that people do well in the world, it is not enough to just let them do whatever they want. It's not enough to just let them be free. We got to we got to give them the tools with which to use the freedom well. And one of these tools is education. So yeah, well, not all freedom is created equal. And if not all freedom is created equal, then then it seems that Mill is a little bit too optimistic. You can't just assume that people will make good choices just by letting them, leaving them to their own devices. We got to make sure that people have some education at least. They have some, so that they have the tools to make good use of their freedom. Okay, so before I let you go, if you believe in freedom the way that Mill does, if you believe that it is enough to just leave people to their own devices and then they will do whatever they want, they will do good things, then you basically believe in what we call negative liberty. You just kind of free people from constraints, give them no constraints, and they'll figure things out on their own. But if you believe that not all freedom is created equal, if you believe that in order for people to be free, you got to also give them certain tools to use their freedom properly, then basically you believe in positive liberty, which is that it's not just the freedom. In order to be really free, you can't just be free from constraints. You also have to be free to make good choices. And in order to be free to make good choices, you need certain things like education and stuff like that. So Tuesday is the writing assignment. But on next Thursday we'll go into this thing more. Then the difference between negative liberty and positive liberty. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so it is exactly 4:50. Okay, I am constrained to let you go. So thank you very much. I'll see you